Hi, I'm Connie Fox with Freedom from Metals. And I have a question here from Sandra from New York. And she has asked, I've been sick for over a year and I just found out I'm mercury toxic. I'm afraid to take a chelator to help remove it from my body because I heard it can make you much worse. Why is it so complicated to remove the mercury and how long will it take me to remove it all and feel good again? So I'll explain the basics here in the process involved with removing the mercury, and this applies to all metals, but mercury is the hardest metal by far to remove from the body, including chemicals, radiation. Mercury just takes more work and a bit more time to remove it from the cells, and especially the brain cells. But the process involved when we get exposed to a toxic heavy metal or mercury here in Sandra's case, what happens is when we're exposed to mercury, it leaves the bloodstream very quickly upon exposure, and it starts getting stored inside the cells intracellularly. It also has the capacity to cross the protective blood-brain barrier and gets into the brain cells. And it's especially hard to get mercury out of the brain versus the other cells in the body. So mercury especially can just be challenging to remove than like lead, aluminum, arsenic, or chemicals, for example. But that's one thing just to clearly understand, that the mercury is stuck. It's stored, it's trapped inside the body's cells, including the brain cells. And it's certainly not good leaving it in there. Sandra, you're sick, you have symptoms, and time eventually keeping it in a poisonous substance in your body long term can eventually lead to developing illnesses and diseases. So we certainly don't want to keep it in the body, in the cells, but it can be a greater hardship to remove it from the body. The process involved, it really does not have to be complicated, and it's really not complicated if you really understand how mercury and metals affect the body, the organs and glands, the nervous system, the brain, the gut, and so forth, every cell in the body actually, and what to do about it. And so I'll explain the basics a little further, and then I'll get into it in much more detail in another video coming up shortly. But the process involved when we remove mercury that's stuck inside the cells. We take a, quote, chelator, as you mentioned, a chelator. Chelator is a drug. It's a synthetic drug that is like a magnet to the metals inside the cells. It draws it out of the cells like a magnet and pulls it out of the cells. Now it's passing through the bloodstream and traveling through the body to exit mainly through the liver and kidneys, the stool and urine. Of course, some gets removed via the skin, the lungs, via our breath, but most gets passed, and filtered through the liver and kidneys. Now imagine this is a horrible poisonous substance. Mercury is traveling through the body now, free floating throughout the body in the extracellular terrain, and it's causing cellular damage to every single cell it comes into contact with. Also, imagine pulling mercury out of your brain, a very delicate part of the body, needless to say, and doing that too much too quickly can exacerbate symptoms, and it can also be dangerous if done too quickly, too much too soon, and if you have not properly prepared the body for the safe, effective removal of the metals. And that's what's key here, and understand, because this is what makes it not a complicated process. This is what resolves the complications involved with removing metals and mercury. So I'll get into this. But getting back to the chelator, typically what's oftentimes recommended is a chelator, a drug that pulls out the metals so it can pass through the body and exit mostly through the urine and stool. There's natural chelators, which are called heavy metal detoxifiers. These are natural substances that do the same thing a chelator does. It draws or pulls out like a magnet the metals from inside the cells, but it's a much safer substance. One, it's natural. It's not toxic in and of itself like chelators are. They're very harsh on the gut, the liver, the kidneys. They bind to your minerals as well as the metals. So they very quickly deplete you of minerals on a cellular level. And when we're heavy metal toxic, we always get nutritional deficiencies. We're typically starting off with nutritional deficiencies, especially minerals. So it can be dangerous if we're going to deplete our cells of the minerals they need to function. So we want to do that cautiously and at the right time and dosage. Heavy metal detoxifiers are just more gentle. They're natural, they're more gentle, they're safer, they're not toxic in and of themselves, so they don't bind to the minerals, stealing them from the cells, getting it. So there's chelators that you can take. There's natural chelators that are just heavy metal detoxifiers. There's also mobilizers that should be taken simultaneously with the chelators and or detoxifiers. A mobilizer, a common one is cilantro. It doesn't draw out metals from inside the cells, but it helps support the mobilization, the ongoing movement and flow of the metals to travel through the body and out. So it doesn't store the metals that are released from the chelator or detoxifier, and now it's flowing through the body. Some of the metals always restore in other cells as they're traveling through the body. Imagine if you pull some mercury out of the brain or that's in your muscle tissue in your shoulder, and then it's traveling through your body. Some of it's going to get restored or put into restored. I don't mean as recovered, restored, but it's going to store inside cells elsewhere. Some of it, does travel through the liver and kidneys and out through the stool and urine, but some of it stores in other cells as it's traveling through the body. So, it can store in the pancreas on its way out, or the heart, or the muscle tissue in the stomach, or anywhere. So mobilizers just kind of help keep it moving and flowing and help prevent some of the metals from restoring in other cells as they're traveling through the body to exit. Now, there's also binders, which should be taken during the detoxification process. Binders are substances that help bind the metals in the intestinal tract and facilitates the removal of those metals out through the stool and helps prevent some of the recirculation that passes through the gut lining and goes back into the bloodstream and recirculates and basically repoisons us. And of course, that can exacerbate symptoms and make us worse. If that's too much of that is done all at once, then it can be dangerous and really cause excessive cellular damage by repoisoning us. So the timing, the dosage, and properly preparing the body is essential for the safe, effective removal of the metals. So it, again, not to repeat myself, but that's what makes it not a complicated process. And it can be, actually, believe it or not, it can be a smooth, non-problematic process to remove mercury and metals, including from the brain, if you know how to properly prepare your body and you have a good understanding of the proper timing and dosage of what you're taking. So there's a lot of factors involved, and it is a little complex, I'll admit. It's definitely complex, but I keep it really simple, and it can be kept rather simple. So, in fact, I'll mention the 9 achievements, what I just call, it's on my homepage. You can read some, info on there. It's very helpful, freedomformetals.com. But the 9 achievements is what I call the 9 goals that we need to accomplish to properly prepare our bodies for the safe, effective removal of the metals, where we make it a smooth, non-problematic process. So I'll briefly touch on those, and then the next couple videos or so, I'll get into these 9 achievements a little more in detail and explain it a little more so. But it's so important just to understand the basics of how mercury and metals affect the body, the organs and glands and different bodily systems, and what our goals are. What are our goals? What do we need to accomplish to achieve a full recovery? So many people don't have that basic understanding, so it can be very challenging and confusing. It can also, take away from our motivation to follow a program if you really don't understand, what you're doing and why and what your goals are to accomplish, a recovery. I'll explain those very briefly here and then get it into that in more detail in another video. But just getting back to binders really quick. Binders are helpful at preventing some of the recirculation of the metals, but they're not the be-all end-all. A lot of people think they're just the be-all end-all. If you just take binders or a lot of binders, it's going to resolve all the complications involved with removing metals. And it is a very important part of a heavy metal detox program, but it's in just my opinion, it's not the be all end all. It's supportive, it's helpful, it's needed, but there's much more to it than just taking some binders with a chelator or heavy metal detoxifier. But those are just the 3 main things that are typically recommended: chelators and or heavy metal detoxifiers. A mobilizer is actually often overlooked, but there's others as well. Cilantro is just one common one. How you time these is important, but in the binders, there's different binders. Binders alone can be sometimes problematic. So getting the right binder for you and introducing it at the right time and the right dosage is very important, and varies with each case, of course. But I want to point out one other thing here is that there are nutrients. Nutrients also remove metals from the cells. And there's 5 really main nutrients. Of course, all cells need all nutrients, but there's 5 nutrients that if we get in our bodies simultaneously, meaning daily, they act like a natural chelator, and they do pull metals out from within the cells, including the brain cells. Of course, these minerals and other nutrients cross the blood-brain barrier as they're intended to and get to the brain cells. So it does pull them out of the brain as well. But we do need to further facilitate the removal of the metals with heavy metal detoxifiers and or chelators, just to make that process go more quickly. But I'll just briefly mention the 5 nutrients. I learned this from Dr. Klinghardt, the one doctor that saved my life out of 97 doctors I saw in an 8-year period of time. So I was severely mercury poisoned with Lyme disease, and he was the one doctor out of 97 doctors that knew how to help me, and I fully recovered as a result of his care, and I'm greatly grateful to him, of course. And so you'll hear me reference him a lot, actually, because a lot of what I impart, I learned from him, and of course, my own personal experience, my 8-year horrific experience with being severely mercury poisoned and having many conditions that metal toxicity causes, including Lyme disease, is commonly caused by more severe heavy metal toxic conditions. But I learned from him the 5 nutrients the cells need to remove metals from the cells is minerals, sulfur, healthy oils, amino acids, and vitamin C. So any heavy metal detox program should include incorporating ample amounts of these 5 nutrients daily, and not too much too quickly as well. Some people find out, oh, I need minerals, I'm mercury toxic. And you don't want to all of a sudden take a bunch of minerals, because then you can start mobilizing the metals too much too quickly and exacerbate the symptoms, cause a setback, which can really be horrible. The symptoms involved, especially with mercury, can be horrific, the mental and neurological symptoms. So the last thing you want to do is exacerbate symptoms by mobilizing too many metals too quickly before your body is at a state of health where it's capable of handling that level of removal. So it is a little of a delicate procedure, but when you know how to properly prepare the body and you do things kind of in a systematic order, which I'm going to teach all about in my videos here. I'm going to share everything. And this information is so needed because so many people don't have this understanding. This information is not taught in our medical schools and dental schools yet in America, unfortunately. So it's just hard to get this knowledge and information, and especially understanding how to work with those who are more moderately to severely toxic versus someone that's just very mildly toxic. We have to get on a completely different program than someone that's very mildly toxic. So, that's a factor as well. But once you understand basically the 9 achievements here is what I call it, and make some progress accomplishing these goals to a certain degree at least, then you can start removing the metals, and it can be a safe, smooth process. So again, uncomplicated. So it takes away the complications that are often involved with, removing the metals, and especially mercury. So the first achievement is to resolve the leaky gut condition, inflammation. This includes mast cell activation syndrome. So metals damage the gut lining and the intestinal mucosal layer, cause inflammation, a hyperreactive immune response. Oftentimes, one starts developing sensitivities to foods, supplements, herbs, pollen in the air all of a sudden out of nowhere, or multiple chemical sensitivity, starts becoming less tolerant of being able to handle exposure to other toxins, chemicals. So just get sensitive because the gut lining is very inflamed and, irritated, of course, from damage from the metals. I'll point out cells repair and regenerate. So don't worry. It's not the forever. These cells repair and regenerate. There is a solution for this, I assure you. So the second achievement is to redevelop a strong immune system. About 80% of our immune system is the good bacteria that lives in that intestinal mucosal layer, that thin mucousy layer that surrounds the entire inner lining of the intestines. So that good bacteria in there gets stripped away. If the mucosal layer gets stripped away, a good part of the immune system gets stripped away. So we need to rebuild that and replenish, redevelop a strong, resilient immune system again. The third goal we want to accomplish is to replenish cellular hydration. We get cellular dehydration when we're toxic, acidic. So that's extremely important. If our cells can't absorb the blood well, or the oxygen, water, and nutrients in the blood well, nor expel intracellular toxins well, because they're dried up and not getting just the hydration they need, we're going to be challenged with effective detoxification. So that's very important to improve cellular hydration. The fourth one is rebalance the thyroid hormone levels. So that is our fourth achievement or goal that we need to accomplish. And mercury especially very commonly causes a hypothyroid condition. On rare cases, a hyperthyroid condition, but usually a hypothyroid condition. About 70-80% of my clients actually develop a hypothyroid condition, as did I. This is one kind of challenging thing to identify sometimes, because you can go see 10 different doctors with your thyroid blood levels and get 10 different opinions. Many practitioners will just say, oh, if you're within the reference range, you're fine. I learned that's very not true, that we can have a very hyper or hypothyroid condition and still have our thyroid levels within the reference range. So we need to get our thyroid levels ideally balanced. And that is so key and makes such a huge difference in many symptoms and improving our state of health very quickly, actually. It's actually quite simplistic to accomplish this, and even naturally, but that's needed to get our thyroid levels balanced. Imagine thyroid, the hormone, gives every single cell in the body the energy it needs to function optimally. So if we have a hypothyroid condition, imagine all of our cells, all of our organs and glands are simply not getting the energy they need to function optimally. And everything's going to be sluggish and not functioning well just from that alone. So it's really, really important. Restoring the nutritional deficiencies. When we're heavy metal toxic, we always, from one degree or another, develop nutritional deficiencies. Metals bind to all of our minerals like a magnet, steals it from the cells getting it. It also does that to our thyroid hormone, and that's just one reason why we can develop a hypothyroid condition. But we get nutritional deficiencies. We also get impaired assimilation, methylation, because it damages the gut lining. We can't properly break down and absorb our food nutrients well. That causes nutritional deficiencies, no matter how well we're eating and the supplements we may be taking. So that's very important. We need to, of course, get the needed nutrients to each organ, gland, cell all over the body. Rebuilding the organs and glands is the sixth goal that we want to accomplish, where we start to strengthen, nourish and strengthen and rebuild and regenerate our organs and glands so they can start functioning more optimally, of course. 7 is repairing the cellular damage. That is done with nutrients. There's one thing on earth, next to stem cells in modern medicine anyway, one thing on earth that repairs cellular damage, and that is nutrients. There's no magic pill or procedure that will do that for us. It's nutrients. So it's really, really important to get the needed nutrients to the cells, not only so they can just function as they're supposed to, function optimally, but also to effectively repair and regenerate damaged cells. And we get damaged cells from the metals and the pathogens that we get when we're heavy metal toxic, which is our number 8, and nutritional deficiencies. When a cell doesn't get all the nutrients it needs, it starts to break down and oxidize. So we start feeling better when we repair and regenerate damaged cells. No matter what symptom we have, it doesn't matter what it is, it's always a result of cellular damage. So we really want to have our heavy metal detox program. A big part of that, a very important integral part of that, is repairing and regenerating the cellular damage. And of course, that's what's going to start improving symptoms. So number 8, the 8th goal here is rid of pathogens. We need to eradicate the pathogens. And here again, if we're heavy metal toxic, we always develop the overgrowth of pathogens from one degree or another. It usually starts off as like candida overgrowth and bad bacteria overgrowth, dysbiosis or SIBO, parasites, and we get yeast, fungus, mold, and viruses. Epstein-Barr virus, Lyme co-infection. I learned from Dr. Klinghardt there's thousands of species of microbes. There's no medical name for, there's no medical test for. If you're heavy metal toxic, I just presume you've got them from one degree or another. And so a really effective, thorough, complete antimicrobial, what I just call an antimicrobial protocol is needed. And again, at the right time, it can be a little bit of a hardship to start killing a bunch of microbes. That causes die-off and more toxin load to your body. So we want to make sure that we've improved the condition of the gut, you're less sensitive and inflamed. We've made some progress improving the state of health in several different ways. First, to where you're at a better state of health, more stable, more comfortable, less reactive, and less sensitive, more vital, and able to handle the rigors of eradicating the pathogen. And they block all our detox pathways. They're eating half our nutrients every day. They're causing cellular damage everywhere constantly. I know it sounds icky, but they're all over the body, organs, glands, the brain, everywhere. Of course, the intestinal tract. So that's really important to address these pathogens. And then we can successfully open all the detox pathways, the liver, kidneys, gallbladder, the neck region, where a lot of microbes kind of hang out and conglomerate there. They can clog this whole neck region, which is our main detox channel of the body, the adenoids, tonsils, lymph system, the vagus nerve. And this being cleared up, of course, in the whole neck region and that whole lymph system area enables us to drain neurotoxins, toxins that we're going to be pulling out from the brain cells. So they need to properly pass through the neck region. It's very important, a main, or perhaps the main detox channel here. Some practitioners will call that the toilet of the body. It's a little bit of a crass analogy, but it's a good one, because if this is all clogged with microbes and all the waste that they're producing and mycotoxins and so forth, then our tonsils and adenoids and the whole neck region here can't drain neurotoxins efficiently. And so then imagine if we're taking something to remove the metals in the brain, it can't channel down and through the neck as it's supposed to. We're just going to be mobilizing a bunch of metals in our head. It's not going to be able to leave the body efficiently. And then that absolutely can be very dangerous and exacerbate symptoms and cause horrific mental and neurological symptoms. So that needs, we want to prevent that at all costs, of course. And we don't want to start pulling out a bunch of metals until we know we've opened the detox pathways to a good degree. And so it can channel through and out of the body well. Very important. The last achievement needed to accomplish, preparing the body for the safe, effective removal of the metals is the 9th step. And the last step is removing the heavy metals. And when we've properly prepared the body by accomplishing these 9 achievements, or the prior 8 ones, then again, it doesn't have to be a complicated, problematic, painful, suffering experience. It does not. And that's why I actually do what I do, because it's so unnecessary. I went through sheer hell and torture for 6 years, doing all the wrong things based on the advice of my practitioners. And none of them understood that I have to properly prepare my body first for the safe, effective removal of the metals. When you're more moderately or severely toxic, we can't just start off our program, taking a bunch of stuff to start removing the metals. Like someone that's very mildly toxic they can start off detoxing. And, their program's much more simplistic, quicker, and easier. They don't need to do all of this prep work, but more moderate to severely toxic cases, we need to be treated differently. We need to properly prepare the body first by accomplishing these 9 achievements. And these are our main goals that we want to accomplish that enables us to achieve a full recovery. So, and in the next couple of videos, I'm going to get into these 9 achievements in more detail, just to help you understand, for those that don't, a little more specifics and a little more detail on each of these 9 goals. So understanding that well opens up everything for us, all the confusion, all the complication. It's, everything. We connect the dots and can understand what we need to do and why. And it just, really can make the rest of our program so much easier and less confusing and less complicated. So I'll leave it at that for this video, and I look forward to doing the next one. And I invite you to leave your questions below. Any questions you might have, I invite you to put them in the comments below, and I will get to them shortly. I'll be leaving a couple of videos each week, educational videos for you, and I'm looking forward to getting into a lot more info and sharing that with you. All right, thank you.